ActionSA's national chairperson, Michael Beaumont, says the multi-party coalitions in the country are missing one of the most fundamental elements, which is a conversation with the masses that they represent. The party has now expressed concern over the future of coalitions in Gauteng following the collapse of the multi-party government in the city of Joburg exactly a week ago. Beaumont says they're looking into engaging more with the South African public.
I think the critical thing to respect at this point in time for ActionSA is that we are a serious organization. We have leadership structures. And when our leadership structures ask us to undergo a review, it might be premature for me to be able to talk about the solutions right now. We need to go through a process of introspecting in these coalitions. We need to go through a process of talking to other political parties. And I think most importantly, that process has to include a phase of talking to the South African people, who I think in many ways are not included in conversations that really do determine their futures and how their lives are dealt with in these municipalities. And we want to make sure we bring their voice into this review process as well. We need to turn around a legacy of decades of failed service delivery and corruption. That is what the agenda of these multi-party coalitions were. And you can't do that in 9 or 10 months. This isn't a sprint. You can't come in here and fix things in 9 months and things fall apart and it's all okay.
Yeah.
You've got to put together continuous and stable government for multiple terms in office if we're going to be able to address some of those very serious challenges like infrastructure backlogs that vastly exceed the budget. And that's why we have to talk about stability in coalition. Yeah. I think that's the conversation that really has to guide us going forward.
Let's talk more about the dramatic coalition politics in South African metropolitan municipalities. We can speak now with political analyst Ebrahim Fakir. Ebrahim, a very good afternoon to you. You're joining us by phone. I'm not sure how much you were able to hear of Michael Beaumont's comments earlier saying that what ActionSA now wants to do is to engage more with the voters, basically, in trying to shape coalitions. Do you think that's what's been the missing ingredient?
And a bit rich. I'm surprised that a political party has decided after perhaps it's time to think about and talk to the voters around what they want. But, you know, be that as it may, much of the way in which the politics own expediency and brinkmanship with which they've behaved, they've hardly ever considered the question of continuity and stability in government. Now, again, of course, a year later, they've discovered the idea that, oh, hold on, actually, we need some continuity and stability in order to provide service delivery. So, as late as the awakening is, at least there's an awakening. How are they going to actually conduct this with the people who support them and what they think most people would like them to do is of course, open to them. But let's just be frank. The reality is that the way from coalitions have been structured by political parties has been on the basis of what's in the interest of the parties, what's in the interest of their leaders, what best can they get out of it in terms of procurement, in terms of influencing public spending, a limited degree to which influencing public spending is important because, you know, dispensing that kind of patronage is why parties get into power. But when it's just about the expediency and brinkmanship about the parties and the party leaders' interests, it doesn't serve the voters, obviously. It doesn't serve any constituency in society. Yeah. And so that constituency in society has been the completely missing element in all of this coalition talk.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that the voice of the voter would come in post this process when, for the longest time, as you were saying, the political parties have been making all the decisions, and a lot of voters feel as though their preferred party in all of this coalition drama has sometimes gone with a party they simply never wanted to deal with anymore. So they've been given the worst end, if you will, of the bargain. Is that true, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, social distance has been a thing with our political parties long before COVID hit us. So their social distance from their constituencies, from their own members, has been so marked that the party leaders have gone into the decision-making without even consulting their membership. And then, of course, they sell it to the public by saying, oh, no, this is what voters want. Well, actually, they didn't even talk to the voters. So, absolutely, there's this tie of parties to constituencies, to communities in society, even to their own members, has not guided their decision-making. It has largely been about short-term interest in the interest of the party. And that's basically it. And that's what led to the brinkmanship and the expediency with which they behave. Now, to start talking about stability, let's think about what the voters want. It's all a little bit late. It's all a little bit rich. And if you look at the level of trust that ordinary South Africans have in political parties, it's at an all-time low. You'll find many reliable opinion surveys saying that, most people trust political parties to a very small degree. Less than a quarter of South Africans have in them. So that's saying something.
And when you listen to, at least around the drama in Johannesburg, right, the smaller parties, ActionSA has said this perhaps the loudest, felt that they were bullied by the DA because it had a larger share of the vote post the November local government elections last year. But without their smaller percentages, the DA was clearly, as we've seen, not able to hold on to the Joburg Metro. Yes, they're fighting it out in court, but ultimately, does it matter, do you think, as we see an increase in the number of these coalition governments, does it matter still whether one has the majority or the largest share at all?
Ordinarily it should, because the democratic logic, at least of proportionality and representation, is that those with the largest share should be included, right? But if you take that logic, Tembekile, it means that the logical conclusion and the logical alliance and inclusivity would be that of the ANC, because irrespective of the other parties coming together and ganging up, the largest share of votes which have been given by the voters has been to the ANC. So, of course, they've got the most number of votes, but not a majority. Now, that the other parties come together and band against them, that's entirely appropriate, provided they do so within the rules which they did. But then they've got to honor the basic agreements that they reach amongst themselves. But if you want to take the democratic logic of representation and proportionality to its logical extent, it means that the executive should, and there is provision in legislation for this, by the way, the MEC of provincial and local governments in provinces can actually advise municipalities to adopt this approach. Right. That means all executive portfolios are distributed on a proportional basis in response to the votes that you get. That has its own problems, because you're forcing parties who don't want to work together to work together. So what we have in South Africa is a basic problem of not respecting the rules, not respecting each other, and not having basic values such as honesty and truthfulness in the way in which you go about dealing with each other in coalition or as opposition parties.
So I'm glad you mentioned the coalition agreements, because often when there's fallout from the various coalitions, there's disagreement around what was agreed, the interpretation of the agreement. And I wonder if there's room to strengthen the coalition arrangements or perhaps even make them more binding.
No, there isn't. I mean, any set of rules finds loopholes. Any system of governance, any contract has loopholes, firstly. Secondly, if you do so in bad faith, irrespective of how tight the rules are, and South Africans are generally notorious for non-compliance with any kind of rules. So to me, it doesn't matter. If you don't have the basic values of faithfulness, truthfulness, and honesty, irrespective of how many rules you have and how tight you try to regulate the thing, overregulation is simply going to create greater administrative and compliance burdens, but also it means that, if you do so in bad faith, nothing stops you from breaking it.
Ebrahim Fakir, good to speak to you as always. Thank you.